So, the new Lilo and Stitch remake has landed, and let's just say, it's kind of a mixed bag. Some parts hit the nostalgia button just right, but a lot of it feels like something got lost in translation. A bunch of fan-favorite elements are either toned down or totally missing. And while the movie clearly tried to bring the spirit of the original to life, it doesn't always stick the landing. Let's walk through the big changes, the odd choices, and a bunch of little secrets you might have missed if you blinked. First off, let's talk about Jumba and Pleakley, because they're some of the most recognizable faces, or faces and tentacles, from the franchise. In this new version, they're mostly in human form. That's probably to cut down on CGI costs, or maybe to avoid creeping out younger viewers. But here's the thing. While they're technically the same characters, they just don't feel the same. Pleakley, for instance, doesn't wear women's clothes anymore. That was a huge part of his charm in the original. His love for wigs and fabulous outfits was funny and gave him a quirky identity. But now, he's just a guy in fairly regular clothes. The actor still brings some of that weird energy, but without the over-the-top wardrobe, it doesn't land the same way. It's like the character's missing a piece of what made him shine. Now, Stitch himself, he actually looks amazing in CGI. His fur's fluffy, his ears are expressive, and those wide-eyed mischievous looks are totally on point, so no complaints there. But here's the weird part. The other aliens don't look nearly as good. Jumba and Pleakley, when they aren't disguised, end up looking like animatronics that wandered out of a theme park attraction. Creepy animatronics at that. And it's kinda jarring because Stitch looks like this cute alien pet, and then you've got these other creatures who honestly look like they belong in a horror movie. It creates a weird disconnect every time they're on screen together. And speaking of weird changes, let's talk about Cobra Bubbles. In the original, he was this mysterious former CIA agent turned social worker, which gave him this cool dual vibe. Like he was tough and knew about aliens, but he genuinely cared about Lilo. In this new version, though, he's just a straight-up CIA agent pretending to be a social worker. So he feels more like a government spy and less like someone who actually has Lilo's best interests at heart. That little tweak makes a big difference, because it takes away a lot of the depth and warmth that made him a fan favorite. Another bummer? Pleakley's costume changes got axed. Originally, there were concept art images showing him in a bunch of fun outfits, scarves, jackets, maybe even some sparkle. But none of that really made it into the final film. The director did admit they tried to include it, but it just didn't work for live action. So, yeah, there might be a fun accessory here or there, but it's not the full-on fashion show we were hoping for. Then there's Jumba, who kind of gets the short end of the stick in this remake. In the original, he was more than just a villain. He was a brilliant, slightly unhinged scientist who eventually grew to care about Stitch and Lilo. But here, he's just the bad guy. No real backstory, no personal growth. It's a letdown because it takes away one of the more interesting redemption arcs in the original film. Now he's just there to cause problems, without much heart behind it. One of the more emotional details that got lost in the shuffle is Lilo's connection to her parents. Remember how in the original, she believed feeding Pudge the fish could prevent accidents, because her parents died in a car crash on a rainy day? That backstory added so much depth to her character, but the remake doesn't explain any of that. Pudge is still in the movie, but without that emotional tie-in, the scene just feels kind of random. And that makes Lilo's story feel a little emptier. Oh, and if you were hoping to see Captain Gantu charging through walls trying to catch Stitch, nope, not here. He's completely gone. That's a pretty major omission, considering he was the physical threat that upped the stakes in the original's third act. Without him, the movie leans on Jumba to be the main villain, which might explain why they made him meaner. But honestly, it doesn't quite work. Another big change? Lilo's attitude. The original Lilo was feisty, unpredictable, and downright chaotic at times, in the best way. Remember when she straight up tackled a classmate WWE style? It was hilarious, and it showed how fiery she could be. But in the remake, her reactions are way more subdued. She just gives a shove and walks away. It makes her feel more like a typical kid instead of the delightfully weird, emotionally raw girl we fell in love with in 2002. Now, Tutu the grandmother, she's new, She's David's grandma and ends up stepping in to take care of Lilo when Nani leaves for college. She wasn't in the original, but she does help stitch the story together, no pun intended, and brings a calming presence. But even though she softens the impact of Nani's absence, it doesn't really fix the emotional punch of the sisters being separated. It's a bittersweet change, and depending on how you feel about it, it either adds a new layer or just feels off. And here's the part that really stings. The ending totally misses the point of Ohana. In the original, the message was clear. Family means nobody gets left behind. But in this version, Nani goes off to college and leaves Lilo behind in Hawaii. Sure, she leaves her in good hands, but still, it undercuts the entire message. The original was about sticking together through thick and thin. This one sort of rewrites that in a way that doesn't feel earned. That said, the movie does sneak in some cute callbacks. Stitch hiding under tables, trying to talk like a human, and messing with toys all bring back memories of those classic scenes. They're little Easter eggs, but if you're a longtime fan, you'll catch them and smile. Also, a bunch of background details were clearly pulled straight from the original. Posters on the walls, set pieces like Lilo's record player, and even a super quick Elvis moment are scattered throughout the film. They're easy to miss, but they're there, adding tiny sparks of nostalgia here and there. One relationship that feels different, though, is Lilo and Nani's dynamic. In the original, their relationship was full of tension. They fought, they misunderstood each other, but underneath it all was love, and that made their reconciliation powerful. The remake smooths over most of that conflict. They get along more often, and the fights are toned way down. So when they do reconnect at the end, it doesn't feel quite as earned because the struggle wasn't really shown. There is, however, a small nod to the Galactic Federation. You won't see the full alien council like before, but there's a blink and you'll miss it moment with a hologram showing off alien species in the background. One even kind of resembles the Grand Councilwoman. It's subtle, but it's there for fans who remember the wider space drama. And here's a cool bit. Chris Sanders returned to voice Stitch again. He's the original creator and voice actor, and honestly, that's probably why Stitch still feels right. His voice brings so much character, even in CGI. One area where the film just doesn't quite measure up is the humor. The original had some strange, even slightly edgy jokes, and that offbeat humor was a huge part of its charm. But in this version, the jokes play it much safer. They're cute, sure, but they don't have that same bizarre, chaotic energy. It's almost like the filmmakers were nervous about going too weird, which is funny considering the original movie was proudly all about weirdness. And before we wrap this up, let's circle back to Pleakley's fashion sense, because it really deserves more attention. That love for dressing up wasn't just funny, it was part of who he was. He was unapologetically himself. In the remake, that flair is dialed way down. Some early concept art suggested they wanted to keep it, but in the end, it didn't quite work in live action. So you get some quirky touches here and there, but the full-on fabulousness is missing. It's one of those little things that fans will definitely notice and miss. Lastly, in the credits, there's a sweet touch, a hidden tribute to the original cast and crew. It's not obvious unless you're really paying attention, but it's there. And it's a nice reminder that even with all the changes, some that worked, some that didn't, the people behind this remake still cared about the story's legacy. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for sticking around, and we'll see you in the next one. Don't forget to drop your thoughts or suggestions for future videos down in the comments. Your voice matters.